You couldn't sleep again? The night feels too loud. The shadows stretch a little longer. So you came here. Welcome to Sleepless Stories. Tonight's tale? Just remember, once you listen, it listens back. Before we dive in, comment below what time you're listening. We're all awake for a reason. So let's begin. The sound beneath. They say Paris is a city of light. But no one ever talks about what waits beneath the cobblestones. Beneath the cafes and art galleries, the centuries of revolution and romance. There's another Paris. A silent one. Cold. Carved from stone. Older than the streets above. The Catacombs. 6 million skeletons rest there, stacked like firewood, arranged like decorations. Tourists come and go, snapping photos and laughing nervously, pretending the walls don't stare back. But there are places even the maps won't show you. Tunnels that shift, rooms that breathe, paths that were never meant to be walked again. Sometimes, people hear whispers through their floorboards, feel footsteps in the night, and sometimes someone goes missing. Not stolen, not murdered, just gone, swallowed. Julian Mercier wasn't looking for trouble when he went below. He was searching for his brother. A disappearance no one wanted to talk about. A case gone cold. But what he found in those depths was more than bones and silence. He found something alive, something waiting. And once you hear the story, once you imagine the tunnels, the candle is already lit. Welcome to the 13th path. We've been expecting you. Chapter 1, The Missing Student. Paris, 2018. The headlines barely made a ripple. Tourist vanishes in catacombs after midnight dare. Student's camera found. No sign of owner. One article, a few blog posts, maybe a Reddit thread or two. People talked about it for a couple days. Some thought it was just another urban explorer who got in too deep. Others, the more superstitious kind, whispered about the 13th path. But most? They forgot. But not Julian. He remembered. He had known the missing student, Theo, since their first year of university. Film students together, both fascinated with the occult, urban legends, and the grotesque. They spent weekends watching horror films, reading forbidden books in secondhand shops, and whispering about Paris's darker corners. Julian remembered the last time he saw Theo, leaning over the table at their favorite cafe near Montmartre, eyes wide with the thrill of discovery. You don't understand, Jules. I found something. It's not on any map. It's deeper, older. It's alive. Julian had laughed, chalked it up to too many energy drinks and late-night edits. But Theo hadn't been joking. He had been scared. And 3 days later, he was gone. 6 months passed. No sign of him. Until the envelope came. No return address. Just his name, Julian Marceau, typed in block letters. Inside, a USB drive and a note. If you want to know what really happened, go where I went. Follow the path. The 13th path. Attached was a location, GPS coordinates deep within the old Parisian catacombs, far from the tourist routes. Near a long-sealed maintenance hatch the city swore had been closed since 1995. Julian felt the chill crawl into his bones. 1 week later, he stood before the hatch. It was rusted, dented, and had a spray-painted warning across it. Autre interdite, danger de mort. Julian's flashlight flickered as if in protest. His breath misted in the stale, cold air. Behind him, the faint hum of Paris life was replaced. Chapter 2, The Red Coat Girl. Julian pressed his back against the wall, the rough stones biting into his jacket as he tried to still his breath. Darkness had wrapped itself around him like a shroud, dense and heavy. His flashlight, already dim, flickered one final time and died, plunging him into absolute black. He could still feel the echo of the breath. Close, damp, hungry. He closed his eyes, as if that would somehow help. Then he remembered the girl in the red coat. She had been there one moment and vanished the next. Did she lead him into something, or away from something worse? He waited. Nothing moved. Not the air, not the walls, not even the sound of distant traffic or dripping water. Just that silence again, like the earth itself had stopped listening. Julian reached into his backpack, fumbling for the emergency headlamp he had packed. His fingers finally wrapped around the cold plastic, and with a shaking thumb, he clicked it on. A pale circle of light burst forth, illuminating a narrow tunnel before him. No girl, no breath, just bones. Endless bones. He moved forward slowly. Each step kicked up dust that hadn't been disturbed in centuries. Occasionally, he'd catch sight of more of the strange carvings. Spirals, circles intersected by jagged lines, and crude human faces, all etched into the stone. Some looked recent, too recent. As he rounded a bend, he saw her again, standing in front of a stone archway. The girl in the red coat faced away from him. Her hair was dark and hung in straight lines down her back. Her hands were clasped in front of her, silent. Julian hesitated, but then called out, "Hey, wait, don't disappear again." She turned slowly. Her face was pale, almost porcelain-like. Her eyes were too large, too black, like ink spilled across a page. But she didn't look afraid. If anything, she looked tired. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice soft and low, like it was coming through layers of static. "You brought me here," he said, stepping closer. "No," he did. "I only showed you the door." Julian swallowed hard. "Theo? He's here, isn't he?" She didn't answer, only turned back toward the archway. "This is the chapel, the place where they remember. You mustn't speak inside." "What do you mean?" But she was already walking, her red coat disappearing into the shadows beyond the arch. Julian had no choice. He followed. The moment he crossed the threshold, sound changed. His footsteps no longer echoed. His breathing felt muffled, like he'd stepped underwater. The chamber was vast. High ceilings curved like a cathedral's, supported by pillars made entirely of stacked skulls and femurs. In the center, a stone altar stood, stained with something dark. Surrounding it, a ring of cloaked figures kneeled in silence. Not statues, people, or once people. Their skin was gray and paper-thin, stretched tightly over bone. Their eyes were hollow, and yet they breathed, a slow, steady rhythm. Julian instinctively stepped back, but the girl stood beside him, watching the figures with something like reverence. "They're the Watchers," she whispered. "They remember the names." "What names?" "Everyone who came here. Everyone who never left." Julian's eyes were drawn to a massive book lying open on the altar, its pages turned by an unseen force, each time revealing names etched in ink so dark it looked wet. He stepped closer, unable to stop himself. The pages flipped once more. He saw it, Theo Dupont, and below it, Julian Marceau. His blood froze. "I didn't write that," he said. The girl nodded. "No, but once you walk the 13th path, your name is already written. This place doesn't ask. It remembers." He backed away. "I need to leave. I came to find my friend, not become part of some cult of corpses." She looked at him sadly. "There is no leaving. Not unless the catacombs let you. But maybe if you find the gate, it will open." "The gate?" "There are 12 known paths in the catacombs. The 13th is hidden, alive. It shifts. If you find its heart, you might ask it for passage." Julian looked around the chamber. The cloaked figures had not moved, not even a twitch. But he could feel their attention now, like the whole room was holding its breath. "I don't want to stay here." The girl finally turned toward a passageway behind the altar. "Then follow me. But know this. Once we leave here, the others will see you, and they will want what you still have." "What do I have?" "A future." With that, she stepped into the darkness. And for the second time, Julian followed. The new tunnel was narrower, wetter. The walls were damp, and the air tasted of rust and mildew. Faint sounds echoed from deeper within. Whispers, footsteps, and something that sounded disturbingly like laughter. As they walked, the girl spoke again. "My name was Violet. Before what? Before I took the wrong path. Before I was marked." Julian frowned. "How long have you been down here?" "I don't remember. Time doesn't work here. You'll forget soon, too." He shivered. "Why help me?" She paused, looked back. "Because once someone helped me, and I failed them." Julian thought of Theo, the wild look in his eyes, the fear, the obsession. They came to another fork. This one was strange. Both paths led downward, but the left side was jagged and chaotic while the right was smooth and almost inviting. Violet pointed left. This way. The other path leads to reflection. That's a place you don't want to go yet. Julian didn't ask. He followed. The descent grew steep. Bones embedded in the walls became more elaborate, arranged in complex patterns and shapes. Some seemed to move when he wasn't looking. Then they reached it, a doorway, made entirely of skulls, each grinning wide, some with shattered jaws or teeth worn to nubs. Above it, written in Latin, Cut intrat, respiret ultimum. Julian translated it aloud. He who enters, breathe your last. Violet stepped aside. Beyond this, you're no longer a visitor. You're part of the path. He hesitated, then stepped through. The air changed immediately. He gasped as cold stabbed into his lungs. The passage was pitch black again, but his headlamp flickered to life, though dimmer than before. Almost unwilling, they were in a hallway of paintings, murals drawn in blood and soot. Scenes of people wandering, being devoured, turning into things that crawled on all fours. Violet's voice was barely above a whisper. Every step deeper, the path watches. It learns what you fear. It remembers it. Julian's light caught something in the distance. A door, not made of stone, but of flesh. Veins pulsed across it. A faint heartbeat thudded behind it. His stomach turned. Is that alive? It's the gate, she said. How do we open it? She looked at him, expression unreadable. One of us has to bleed. He looked down at his trembling hands. Then at hers. Her arms bore scars. Faded old. He knew immediately she'd done this before. Before he could offer, she reached for a knife hidden in her coat, drew it across her palm, let the blood drip onto the door. It shuddered, moaned, opened with a sound like tearing meat. Violet turned to him. This is where it gets worse. Julian swallowed hard. How much worse? She didn't answer. They stepped through, and the door closed behind them. Chapter 3. The Voice Beneath. Julian stumbled forward into the passage, barely catching himself against the damp, writhing wall. The flesh door sealed behind them with a wet sigh, leaving the air thick and stagnant. His headlamp sputtered again, but held steady, casting a sickly cone of light down the tight corridor. The walls pulsed slightly, alive like the inside of some great beast. A low humming resonated from below, like a sound that wasn't meant to be heard but felt, vibrating the marrow in his bones. Violet led the way, her steps cautious but assured. She didn't speak, and Julian didn't dare break the silence. It wasn't just reverence, it was fear. The kind of fear that tells you your next breath might be your last if you breathe too loud. The tunnel twisted like a serpent, descending at a subtle angle, and with each step the temperature dropped. He kept glancing back, even though he knew there was no door anymore. Just wall, like they'd been swallowed. Eventually, the corridor opened into a vast chamber, and it was the first time Julian realized he'd been holding his breath. He gasped at the sight. The chamber was circular, wider than any he'd seen so far, like a buried coliseum. Dozens of paths branched out from the center like the spokes of a wheel, each one lined with uneven stones and more skeletal arrangements. Some posed as if mid-scream, others bent in worship. At the heart of the chamber sat a massive pit, its edges decorated with bones sharpened into stakes. And from the pit came a voice. Julian, his spine locked. It wasn't Violet. It wasn't human. It was low and gravelly, like stone grinding against bone. It echoed with impossible depth, not just through the chamber, but through him. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Violet didn't respond at first. Her gaze was fixed on the pit. Then, softly, she said, "It knows your name. That means it sees you now." He turned to her, voice strained. "What is it?" "The voice beneath. It speaks only to the marked. The path's chosen. I didn't choose any of this." Violet looked at him, and something in her eyes darkened. "No one does. That's the price of curiosity." Julian stepped closer to the pit. The stench that rose from it was worse than rot. It was like despair made physical. Below, There was no bottom, just a shifting darkness that seemed to breathe. "Why am I here?" he asked, not expecting an answer. The voice answered anyway. To remember, to suffer, to open the gate. Julian reeled back, nearly stumbling into one of the skeletal pillars. What gate? The gate of return. The one your friend tried to find. How? Violet stepped beside him. He came here, alone, heard the whispers, wanted to see the end. But the end doesn't come in the catacombs. Only layers, deeper and deeper. Julian's throat tightened. Is he alive? The voice answered, with something that almost sounded like amusement. He was. He opened the 11th mouth. Now he sings for us. Julian gripped his temples. The humming in the chamber intensified, the low vibration growing louder until it felt like his teeth would shatter. Visions flooded his mind, flashes of tunnels that bled, hands clawing at stone, eyes watching from inside skulls. Make it stop. Violet placed a hand on his shoulder. Her skin was cold, but her voice steadied him. It's testing you, seeing if your will is strong. If not, you'll feed it. What does it want from me? You, your memories, your voice, everything. It thrives on those who fear the silence. Suddenly, the chamber shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The bones rattled like a choir of chattering teeth. The pit pulsed, something large and wet shifting far below. It's waking, she said. We have to move. Julian followed her down one of the side tunnels, chosen seemingly at random. As they left, he heard the voice again, fainter but still inside his head. You cannot outrun remembrance. The tunnel was narrow, sloping downward again, this time steeper. The further they went, the more twisted the path became. Bones weren't just decorations now. They were the floor, the ceiling, the very structure. Julian had to step across rib cages and duck under pelvic arches. Where does this go? He asked. To the Hall of Echoes. If he left a trace, it'll be there. A trace. Voices. The path records sound. Thought. Memory. Sometimes it plays them back. Sometimes they're trapped. The tunnel widened into a dome-shaped chamber, and he heard them before he saw them. Voices. Dozens. Hundreds. All overlapping. Some weeping. Some laughing. Some screaming. The sound clawed at his sanity. The walls were covered in mouths. Carved, etched, grown from the bone. Each whispered, endlessly, their eyes closed in eternal agony. Julian stumbled forward, clapping his hands over his ears. I can't take this. Violet stood calm, listening. Find his voice, she said. If he left a message, the chamber will echo it. You have to want to hear him. Julian focused. Amid the madness, he tried to remember Theo, his laugh, the way he nervously tapped his fingers, the scent of his cologne, that night in the rain when he first talked about the 13th path. The soundscape shifted, and then one voice rose above the rest. Julian, if you're hearing this, don't follow me. Please. It lies. The 13th isn't a path. It's a hunger. Julian's heart pounded. It showed me you. Showed you dying. Over and over. I thought if I could get deeper, I could change it. I was wrong. The voice cut off, replaced by screaming. Vet. Guttural. Then silence. Julian collapsed to his knees. Violet stood beside him, eyes solemn. He tried to change the story. The catacombs don't like that. He's dead. Worse. Julian stared into the endless mouths, now silent, waiting. Then we go deeper, he said, voice breaking. I'm not leaving him like this. Violet nodded. Then you must face the mirror hall. What is it? A place where the path shows you who you could become, if you stay. Julian looked once more at the walls of mouths, then turned and followed her into the next tunnel. Behind them, one of the mouths opened wide and whispered, he's almost ready. Chapter 4, Reflections That Bleed. The first sound Julian noticed as they entered the next tunnel was the rain. It didn't make sense. He was deep beneath the city, deeper than any subway, farther from the sky than the dead should ever be. And yet, the soft patter of raindrops echoed off the stone, like fingers tapping a coffin lid. Violet stopped, one hand pressed against the tunnel wall. Her lips didn't move, but her eyes were following something, an unseen ripple in the air. "It's starting," she said quietly. "What is?" "This is where it watches, where it tries to convince you to stay." The corridor opened suddenly, revealing a long, cathedral-like hallway. Bone columns rose like ribs, curving upward into an arched ceiling so high, the headlamp barely reached it. The walls were lined with tall, glass mirrors, ancient and cracked, yet somehow shimmering. They pulsed slightly, just like the walls in the chamber before. The air was cold, colder than it had ever been in the tunnels. It wasn't just the damp of the underground. It was wrong, like walking into the breath of something enormous, something exhaling memories instead of air. And still the rain. But it didn't fall. It hovered. Every few feet, raindrops were suspended in midair, frozen like glass beads in a motionless downpour. Julian reached out to touch one, and the second his finger brushed it, the drop exploded into a swirl of images. Pow! Laughing, running, bleeding. Julian stumbled back. "They're not water," Violet said. "They're moments. This place remembers everything it's shown." Julian stared down the hall. Dozens of mirrors, hundreds of raindrops. The space hummed with the tension of things seen, but not yet understood. He walked to the first mirror. His reflection stared back. No cracks, no distortions. Just him, until it smiled. He hadn't. The reflection's eyes darkened, then began to rot in their sockets. Maggots crawled from the corners of its mouth. Its skin sagged, peeled. It raised a hand, and from its palm, a black flame ignited. Julian stepped back, heart thudding. "Each mirror shows you a possibility," Violet said. "Not prophecy, not truth, just potential." Potential for what? For what you become if you stay too long. Julian moved to the next mirror. This time, he was dressed like Violet. Long coat, pale face, candle in hand. He was guiding someone else through the tunnels. A stranger. He looked older, sadder, and behind him in the reflection stood Violet, smiling faintly. "This place doesn't let guides go," she said softly. Mirror after mirror, Julian watched himself fall apart. In one, he was blind, fingers clawing at the walls, whispering to himself. In another, he was part of the wall, his face embedded in bone, his eyes still moving. One mirror showed him sitting at the stone dinner table, like the ones they'd passed. Flesh on his plate, eyes vacant. And then came the last mirror. It didn't reflect him at all. It showed Theo, alive, whole, sitting on the banks of the Seine in the rain, talking to Julian. Julian reached out, and for a moment, the glass warmed under his palm. Then the scene shifted. Theo's head turned. His mouth moved, but no sound came. Then he looked behind Julian, eyes wide. Julian spun around. Nothing, just Violet. "Did you see him?" he asked. She looked at the mirror. "Yes." What was he trying to say? Violet's voice lowered. "He was trying to warn you. But the deeper you go, the less you can trust memory. Even your own." Julian turned back to the mirror. The scene was gone, just his reflection now, but looked unsure. Why are these even here? The catacombs don't want you to forget who you could become. It uses that to keep you. Julian stepped away from the mirrors. The hallway stretched on, darker now. The air got colder. The mirrors started to whisper, just softly. Names, dates, moments. His childhood, his first heartbreak, a joke Theo told in college, his mother's lullaby. He clutched his head. Violet grabbed his hand. "Focus. It's trying to drown you in yourself. Just walk. Don't look. Don't listen." Julian moved forward. Eyes shut tight, but the whispers crept in. He heard Theo scream. He heard his own voice begging to go home. And then he heard something new. "Julian, don't trust her." He stopped. Violet froze. "What did you hear?" she asked carefully. It was him. He said not to trust you. Her expression didn't change, but her grip on his hand tightened. The mirrors lie. They mix truth with fiction. Don't let it break you. Julian looked at her. "You've heard it too, haven't you?" She didn't respond. Ahead, the corridor ended in a tall, arched door carved from stone and bone. It was covered in symbols that shifted when he stared too long. A rain-soaked candle sat beside it, burning somehow. What's through there? Violet hesitated. The dinner room. Julian frowned. The what now? She opened the door. Beyond, a room of stone furniture. A long table. Chairs. Plates. And guests. Chapter 5. The dinner room. The moment the door creaked open, the smell hit Julian like a wall. Decay, sweet and sour, with a rancid undercurrent of something cooked long ago and never meant for human consumption. It clawed down his throat, turned his stomach inside out, and planted a rotting seed in his brain. Violet stepped through the doorway, like she didn't smell it at all. Julian followed, one hand covering his nose, the other clutching the base of his flickering headlamp. The room inside resembled a banquet hall, if a banquet had been thrown in the belly of a corpse. A long table of ancient stones stretched the length of the chamber, flanked by mismatched chairs carved from bones. At each seat sat a guest, skeletons wrapped in faded robes, their bony hands still resting on the table as if they'd been frozen mid-toast. And on each plate, Julian gagged. Meat, flesh, still pink, still glistening, still steaming, though no heat came from anywhere in the room. "How is it fresh?" he rasped. Violet said nothing at first. She walked along the table, brushing her fingers over one of the untouched goblets. Red liquid sloshed inside. Too thick to be wine, too dark to be blood. "It's not fresh," she said at last. "Not really. It only looks that way to the hungry." Julian blinked. "I'm not hungry." She gave him a long look. "Not for food. But you came searching for something, didn't you? Answers. Closure. Him. That kind of hunger attracts the feast." He took a step back from the table. A chair scraped slightly, as if reacting to his hesitation. The bones creaked. "There's a story," she continued, her voice low and steady, "about a man who wandered into the tunnels centuries ago. He was a nobleman, exiled for heresy. Thought he could find God down here. Instead, he found this room." She reached the head of the table. The skeleton there wore a tarnished crown of silver. Its jaw was open, as if caught mid-sermon. "He sat," she said. "He prayed. He fasted. But the longer he stayed, the more the room changed. Food appeared. Voices whispered that it was holy, that he'd been chosen. So, eventually, he ate." Julian swallowed. The air was thickening. The flickering candlelight didn't cast shadows properly. It warped them, made the skeletons twitch in the corners of his eyes. "And then what?" he asked. Violet ran a finger down the crowned skeleton spine. "He never left. They say the dinner never ends for those who taste." The table groaned. Julian turned. One of the skeletons had moved. Just slightly. A tilt of the skull. "It's just a trick," he muttered. "Illusion." He turned to Violet. "You've been here before, right? You never sat." She didn't answer. She looked tired. Older somehow. The skin beneath her eyes had darkened, and there was something hollow in her expression. "You asked me once," she said slowly, "if I had ever eaten. I didn't answer." Julian took a step toward her. "So answer me now. Did you?" Silence. Then, not at first, the bones around them began to shift. The skeletons sat up straighter. Forks clinked. One turned its empty eye sockets toward Julian and smiled. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. "This is the cost of staying too long. The catacombs don't just remember. They reward. They offer comfort, ritual, repetition, but only if you give up everything else." Julian's knees felt weak. The room was spinning. The whispers returned, carried by the sound of the still falling rain somewhere deep above. "You can sit," said a voice. Not Violet. One of the skeletons had spoken. Julian turned, every nerve screaming. Its jaw was still, but the voice had come from it. "Eat, and you'll never be hungry again." Another chair scraped back. Julian looked to Violet. She was crying now, silent tears down pale cheeks. "You brought me here to replace you," he said. It wasn't a question. She nodded once. "I can't leave unless someone takes my place." "I'm sorry." The door behind him groaned. "If you sit," she said, her voice cracking, "the voices will quiet. The pain stops. The past goes away." He stared at the plate in front of him. The meat pulsed slightly. A twitch. A heartbeat. "And if I don't?" She turned away. Then we keep going, and it gets worse. Julian backed away from the table. The whispers became screams. The room howled, but he didn't sit. He turned and walked out. Violet followed, though slower. He didn't look at her. Couldn't. Behind them, the banquet resumed. Forks, knives, that chewing shouts, and a single voice whispering through the darkness. Still hungry. Still yours. Chapter 6. The 13th Path. The hallway beyond the dining room narrowed into a suffocating corridor, its ceiling low and rounded like the inside of a throat. The air grew colder, but the deeper they went, the more Julian realized it wasn't just temperature. It was time. The stone felt older here, somehow less human. The walls bore new carvings, but unlike the graffiti of bored tourists or the initials of star-crossed lovers, these were precise, etched deeply, repeatedly, obsessively. Some were symbols, others were numbers, but most were names. Julian ran his fingers across one. Pierre Mercier. He froze. It was his brother's name. This is where they go, Violet whispered behind him. The ones who vanish. Julian spun to face her. You knew he was here? Her eyes were glassy now, distant, like someone watching a memory play out on the backs of their eyelids. I didn't know. I suspected. Everyone who enters these tunnels is looking for something they lost. But some, she trailed off, reaching toward the stone. Some names only appear after they've surrendered. Julian backed away. The narrow passage yawned ahead, stretching endlessly into the dark. They continued. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally. The same step, again and again, until Julian couldn't remember if he was walking forward or in circles. The walls began to sweat. Thin rivulets of black water trickled from the ceiling, carrying whispers with them. None of it made sense, but the whispers sounded like his name. Then they reached the arch. Unlike the others, this one was carved with surgical precision. Fresh. The stone was still dusty, like it had been chiseled that morning. The inscription read, "You are the 999th soul. The next will open the door." Julian stared at it, heart thudding. The numbers crawled through his mind like ants. Violet said nothing for a moment. Her face had paled. Then, softly, "I'm 998. The floor beneath Julian seemed to vanish. What? She met his eyes. Her voice cracked. I brought people here before, but they always turned back. Got lost. Died. Or worse. You came further than any of them." Julian's mouth went dry. "Why me? Because I'm tired of being the door." She stepped backward into the shadows, and the tunnel behind him sealed shut, not with a crash or quake. Just silence. Stone where the way had once been. Julian turned to run after her, but she was already gone. Gone like the light. Gone like his name. He was alone now, or at least he thought so. The tunnel pulsed. It inhaled. Then, in the quiet, a new voice spoke. Not loud, not angry, just curious. "Would you like to know who 1,000 will be?" Julian looked behind him. No one, but the voice persisted. "Would you like to remember who you were before you were hungry?" The arch flickered. Candles lit themselves, one by one. Then footsteps. Behind him. Slow. Bare. Wet. He didn't turn. Not yet. Because deep down, he already knew. He had passed the threshold. He was the door now. Chapter 7. The Mirror Hall. Julian walked. There was nothing else to do. The tunnel had sealed behind him, and ahead stretched a narrow corridor that seemed to breathe with him. Inhaling when he did, exhaling when he paused. It wasn't just the air. It was the walls. They trembled faintly, as if something massive moved through them, just out of sight. There was a low humming sound, like distant machinery, or something alive murmuring through the stone. Rain dripped through ancient cracks overhead, each droplet echoing like a hammer strike. The moisture slicked the floor, cold as a morgue slab under his boots. The walls were slick, too, as if the stone itself were weeping. Julian dragged his fingers along them for balance, only to jerk his hand away as something beneath the surface twitched. Ahead, faint light shimmered. He turned a corner and entered a chamber unlike the rest. Long and wide, lined from floor to ceiling with mirrors. Hundreds of them, Not modern mirrors. No glass. These were polished obsidian slabs, each embedded into the wall like tombstones, gleaming under some unseen light. Julian stepped cautiously into the hall, feeling the chill deepen. The rain above had become a constant pattern now, like distant applause. The air buzzed. He caught his reflection, but it wasn't right. The man in the mirror looked like him, but older. His hair was grayer, his eyes hollow. He reached toward the reflection, and the man mirrored him. But just before Julian touched the surface, the reflection smiled. Julian didn't. It was the wrong smile. Wide. Too wide. He stumbled backward. The next mirror showed him bloodied. Cuts across his face. One eye missing. Shirt torn and soaked. He turned to the third. This one had him in Violet's coat, holding a candle, but the wax had melted down his hand and into his skin. And he was smiling. Always smiling. Julian moved from mirror to mirror, each one more grotesque than the last. Some versions were skeletal. Others were bound in chains. One was kneeling before the table from the dinner room, gnawing on something human. Another sat atop a throne made of bones, laughing as a crowd of eyeless people bowed. He turned from them, heart thudding. But there was one mirror at the far end. Unlike the others, it was cracked. A single jagged line split the glass down the center. Julian approached slowly, breath shallow. This reflection was different. Familiar. It was him, but this version didn't move. It just stared, pale, gaunt, unmoving. Then it mouthed something. Julian leaned in, fogging the mirror. The reflection said, "You're the guide now." Julian recoiled. No, I'm not. I didn't agree to this. But the mirror didn't care. The reflection raised its hand and pressed it against the inside of the mirror, palm first. Julian could see blood on its fingers. And then, the crack spread. The glass began to bleed. He backed away as a sudden wind gusted through the chamber. The candles extinguished one by one, plunging him into near total darkness. Except for the mirrors. They still reflected. But now none of them showed him. Each mirror displayed someone else. Violet in a wedding gown, crying blood. His brother Pierre, with empty eye sockets, whispering, "Find me." A child wearing a rat skull like a crown, grinning. A man in a police uniform, hanged and swaying slowly, eyes wide open. Julian fell to his knees. He clutched his head, trying to shut it out. The air was thick with whispers now, dozens of voices speaking at once, chanting, begging, mocking. "You are the next. You are the door. You are the guide. You will never leave. You will lead them in." He screamed. It echoed endlessly. The mirror at the far end shattered. The light died. Then silence. When he opened his eyes again, he was no longer in the hall. He was in a tunnel, one he didn't recognize. The mirrors were gone, but the reflections remained. They were walking with him now, invisible, inside him. Chapter 8. The Candle's End. The tunnel narrowed. Julian had to duck to keep going. The dampness clung to his clothes now, like a second skin, and the darkness felt thicker here, like it had weight, like it pressed against him from all sides. His candle was no longer a flame, but a weak ember trembling atop a warped stick of wax. It gave just enough light to remind him how little there was to see. The flame hissed occasionally, whispering like it knew his name, like it had secrets it wasn't ready to tell. He walked for what could have been hours, or maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning down here. The cold was creeping into his bones. He thought about Pierre, his voice, his laugh, the way he always used to tap twice on a table before standing. He thought of their last fight, about what went unsaid. Something scurried nearby. Julian snapped the candle toward the sound. Nothing, just bones. Always bones, stacked along the walls, crushed into the ceiling, embedded in the floor. He was walking on the dead, and they were whispering. No, singing. A low, tuneless hum echoed from deeper in the passage. It was childlike, incoherent, and wrong. It rose and fell like a lullaby sung underwater. Julian felt something tighten in his chest. His breath turned shallow. He came to a crossroad. 3 tunnels. No markings. No difference. He hesitated, then turned slowly to the middle path. As he stepped forward, he noticed something new. lights. Tiny specks ahead, like fireflies, glowing pale blue. He moved toward them. As he drew closer, the lights revealed themselves. Not fireflies, eyes, set into the skulls that lined the tunnel. Hundreds of them, all glowing, all watching. Julian stopped. The eyes blinked, and the candle went out. Everything turned black. He didn't move. Couldn't. Something cold brushed past his cheek. A breath. Not his. Then a whisper, so close it felt like it came from inside his ear. Guide them. Julian gasped and stumbled back, fumbling for matches. His fingers trembled. He struck one. It flared, and he was no longer alone. Around him stood figures. Tall, thin, wrapped in burial shrouds, their faces hidden behind rat skulls. Their hands were long, pale, and wrong, with too many joints. They didn't move. Not yet. One held out its hand. In its palm lay a new candle. Fresh, unlit. Julian stared. No, I'm not the guide. I'm not. But no one spoke. The hand remained outstretched. The eyes in the skulls blinked again, faster this time. The walls quivered. The hum became a chant. Guide them. Lead. Begin again. Julian took the candle. His hands closed around it before he realized what he was doing. And every eye closed. The figures vanished. Silence fell. He struck the match again and lit the candle. The flame flickered, but it held. And with it, a path appeared ahead. A spiral staircase carved into the bone-laced stone, winding down, down, down. Julian didn't look back. He walked, and the candle, now his only anchor, burned brightly, drawing shadows that moved just a second too late. Behind him, something followed. It was always one step behind, whistling the lullaby. Chapter 9. The Man in the Water. Julian descended. The spiral staircase twisted like the inside of a seashell, tight, endless, carved from bone-studded stone. His footsteps echoed as though they belonged to someone else. The candlelight danced along the walls, throwing monstrous shadows that skittered just out of sight. Drips of water pattered rhythmically in the darkness, but there was no breeze, no sound of wind, just the slow descent into deeper blackness. Then, he could hear it again, faint and steady, as if falling in some distant world above. The idea that rain was still real, that somewhere the surface still existed, felt like a dream now. He hadn't seen daylight in how long. The candle's light gave no answers, only prolonged the illusion of control. At the bottom of the stairs, the path opened into a massive cavern. The ceiling arched high above like the nave of a cathedral. And in the center, water, a black, still lake, surrounded by broken columns and submerged stone pews. Reflections rippled across the surface. Julian approached, holding the candle out, the flame now bright, but somehow frail, like it too was afraid. He knelt by the water's edge. His own reflection stared back. Pale, exhausted, different. It blinked. He didn't. Julian stumbled back. Ripples spread. The reflection stayed in place. Then it rose. From the water, a hand broke the surface, fingers long and thin, skin stretched tight over bone. It reached for him, then stopped. Floating just above the waterline was a face. His, but older, and smiling. The same wrong smile he'd seen in the mirror hall. The figure dragged itself upward, water sliding off its robes. Robes like violets. Black, tattered, heavy with time. It stood at the center of the lake, though the water didn't ripple beneath its feet. "Why do you run, Julian?" it asked, voice smooth as whetstone. "You've already begun." He took a step back. "You're not me." "No," the figure agreed. "I'm what's left when you stop pretending." The lake boiled suddenly. More figures rose. Not reflections, people. People he recognized. Pierre, Violet, the old man from the entrance, the child with the rat skull, all waiting from the depths like a congregation rising for sermon. They stood in the shallows, unmoving, staring. "What is this place?" Julian demanded. The figure laughed. It sounded like water gurgling through a clogged drain. A chapel, a tomb, a memory. The end, the beginning. The water began to rise. Julian backed toward the wall, but the stone behind him had changed. It was soft, damp, breathing. You lit the candle. The reflection whispered. You accepted. I didn't. You did. Every step was a choice. Every whisper, a thread pulled. Now you weave the path. The candle flickered wildly. Wind swirled through the cavern. The pews shook. Bones surfaced in the water, skulls and rib cages, spinning slowly like offerings. Julian's ears rang. The figures closed in. Pierre stepped forward. His voice was barely audible. You left me. No, Julian breathed. I looked. I tried. You stopped. The accusation hit like a hammer. He felt his knees. The water was at his boots now. Cold, rising fast. The reflection knelt beside him. You can still finish it. You can lead them out. But not as Julian. The figure held out a mask. White porcelain. Blank. Smooth. Put it on. Forget. Become. Julian shook his head. No, I won't lose myself. The candle flared. The figure screamed. Light tore through the cavern, hot and golden. The water hissed, boiling away. The figures melted into mist. The reflection shrieked. Julian held the candle high. I am the path, he whispered, but I decide where it leads. And with that, the flame exploded, blinding. Then silence. Julian stood alone again. The cavern was gone. Only a narrow tunnel remained. At his feet, the mask. Cracked. He left it and walked on. Chapter 10, The Archive. The tunnel narrowed once more, squeezing Julian between damp walls that breathed and pulsed, like the very catacombs were alive and exhaling. He moved slowly, gingerly, each step punctuated by the faint slap of his boots on wet stone and the quiet hiss of the candle. His shoulders brushed bone and slick roots, and he could hear the dripping again, steady and rhythmic, like a ticking clock counting down to something he couldn't yet name. The candle burned steady now, but the shadows it cast were not still. They jittered and twitched like nervous animals, playing out scenes that made no sense. A wedding procession, a guillotine's fall, a boy kneeling at an altar of teeth. Julian didn't look too closely. He learned by now not to trust the flickers. He emerged into a small chamber, oval-shaped, with a domed ceiling barely taller than his head. Bones lined every inch, but not in the chaotic fashion of the previous tunnels. Here they were arranged, sorted, shelved. It was a library of the dead. Each wall bore rows upon rows of femurs and skulls arranged like books, stacked by size and, eerily, by condition. Some had tags, actual parchment labels, written in elegant, curling French script. Louis Mercier, 1764. Marguerite Blanchard, 1821. Julian scanned the room, heart thudding. Each name felt like a whisper, like an invitation. At the center of the room stood a table, stone, circular, with a single chair pulled out as if someone had just left. On the table was a book, bound in black leather, ancient. He approached it slowly. The candle flickered in anticipation. The book had no title. Julian opened it. The pages were filled with names, dates, notes, but as he flipped further, the language shifted, from French to Latin, then to symbols, glyphs he couldn't place, twisted and jagged like claw marks etched into the parchment. Bloodstains marred some pages. Others were damp, smelling faintly of earth and decay. Then, his name, Julian Moreau, entered 324. Chosen, flame bearer. Status in progress. His stomach flipped. He turned the page. It was blank. Just one line scratched at the top. He who writes here writes the ending. A drawer opened in the table. He hadn't touched it. Inside was a quill. No ink. Julian reached for it. His hand trembled. The moment he touched the quill, the walls groaned. Bones clattered softly as if shifting in their places. Whispers returned, louder now, clearer. He writes. He chooses. He seals. The candle's flame elongated, stretching like a tendril toward the book. Julian stared down, feeling something scrape along the edge of his mind. He dipped the quill in nothing. Still, it glistened red. The first word came unbidden, descent. He wrote. With every stroke, the room grew colder. The shadows on the wall ceased dancing. They watched. Julian didn't know how long he wrote. Time had dissolved. His hand moved on its own, guided by something ancient, patient, and blind. When he stopped, the book snapped shut. The candle extinguished. Total blackness. Then, the shelves groaned. Bone dust rained from the ceiling. The walls opened like a curtain being drawn aside, revealing another chamber, far larger, lit by soft blue flames and sconces made of rib cages. Julian stepped forward. Behind him, the book pulsed with faint heat. He didn't look back. This was no longer just survival. This was ritual. He was writing the path with every step. And the archive remembered. Chapter 11, The Choir of Teeth. The chamber Julian entered echoed with an eerie, melodic hum, as though the walls themselves were singing. The flames in the ribcage sconces pulsed gently, synchronized with the rhythm of the strange music. But it wasn't music, not really. It was breath. Dozens of voices inhaling and exhaling in perfect unison, rising and falling like a phantom chorus. The air was damp, metallic, and sweet, the scent of rot layered with the perfume of ancient incense. He stepped forward, and the stone floor beneath him sang slightly, like pressure against an organ pipe. Ahead, the chamber opened into a vast, circular cathedral carved entirely from bone. Rows of seated skeletons lined the curved stone pews, jawbones fixed open in silent screams or hymns, eye sockets tilted upward as though worshipping a god that no longer acknowledged them. On the altar at the center, a massive skull, not human, was perched atop a twisted spine that spiraled toward the ceiling like a pillar. The skull's teeth were long, sharp, arranged in chaotic perfection. It looked both ancient and impossibly new, as if it had just been placed there by unseen hands. The humming grew louder. Julian crept forward, candle in hand. The light flickered wildly, casting frenetic shadows. Something was moving behind the seated skeletons, shifting between them. He caught a glimpse of robes, then eyes, dozens of them, gleaming wetly in the candlelight, watching him from the corners of the cathedral. A voice called out, not aloud, but in his mind. The song remembers. He spun around. Nothing. Only bone and silence. Yet the hum vibrated through his chest, deep and warm like a lullaby, turned sinister. From the side aisles emerged the choir. Figures shrouded in black, their faces obscured by masks of human jawbones, walked slowly into the nave. Each mask had teeth meticulously filed to points, and they carried no candles. They needed no light. Julian backed up toward the wall. The candle flared in panic. One step forward. Its mask was larger. A crown of molars circled its brow. "You wrote the first line," it said. The voice reverberated from its mask, filtered and mechanical. "Now you must hear the rest. I didn't mean to write anything. I was just trying to find a way out." The choir all turned toward him, as if disappointed. "There is no out," the crowned figure replied. "Only further in." Julian's breath hitched. "You lit the candle. You walked the path. You wrote your name in the archive. Every act has a cost. Every song a silence." From behind the altar, the massive skull opened its mouth, and the hum became a roar. Julian fell to his knees, clutching his head. The sound was inside him now, vibrating through bone, stirring old memories and unfamiliar fears. He saw flashes, a crib filled with worms, a staircase leading only downward, his mother's face split open in a smile too wide, too red. He screamed, but the sound vanished beneath the choir's roar. The crowned figure stepped forward, lifting its hand. The sound stopped. Total silence. "You have seen now," it said, "the truth beneath the city, the hunger of memory." Julian trembled. "What do you want from me?" "To listen, to remember, to sing." With that, the choir began again, soft this time. A low hum. They circled him slowly. One reached forward and placed a mask on the ground in front of him. This one bore his own teeth. He recoiled. "No, I won't join you. You already have," whispered the crowned one. The candle guttered, nearly extinguished. In its brief flare, Julian saw himself, reflected in the black eyes of the mask, singing, smiling. Then the lights in the sconces began to die, one by one. Darkness came not as a shadow, but as a silence. And Julian's voice rose with the choir. Chapter 12. The Saltwater Maze. There was no recollection of movement. One moment, Julian was kneeling in the Cathedral of Bones, the mask of his own teeth lying before him like an accusation. The next, he was submerged in thick, tepid water, salt burning his lips, his eyes, his throat. He surfaced, gasping in total darkness. His candle gone. The choir silent. The echoes of the Skull Cathedral, now only a sensation in his rattling nerves. But there was light. Pale green moss glowed faintly along the tunnel walls, enough to cast trembling shadows on the rippling black water. Julian floated in a narrow channel, walled in on both sides by skeletal structures, ribs, spines, jaws, like the passage had been formed by the buried remains of leviathans. A distant rumble echoed through the tunnel. Thunder. Then, above the streets of Paris, the storm must have broken. Down here, the sound reached him like a distant funeral drum, and with each beat, the water level rose a little more. Julian swam. The channel forked. No marquins, no simbes, left or right, but the right tunnel sloped downward, and something in him, a whisper, maybe his own madness, urged him that deeper was always worse. He chose left. The water chilled. As he paddled, he began to hear it again. Faint murmurs. Not the choir. These are whispers more intimate, personal. They called to him by name. Julian, the voice of his mother, exactly as he remembered it when she tucked him in as a child. Then his sister, laughing softly, repeating a lullaby long forgotten. He spun around in the water. Empty. The tunnel curved, the glow growing brighter. Bones jutted from the walls now, as if trying to claw their way out. He saw faces in the limestone, some serene, some screaming. The whispers turned to weeping. Then he saw her, floating on the water ahead, face up, eyes open. Violet, pale, still. Her lips were blue. Julian's heart stuttered. He kicked forward, reaching for her, but when he touched the body, it crumbled like wet paper. Nothing remained but a dress, drifting like seaweed. The water surged. A wave out of nowhere slammed him into the wall. His head cracked stone. The world swam. And then, he wasn't alone. Hands brushed his ankles from below. Cold. Searching. He screamed, twisting, splashing, trying to climb the slick walls, but there was nowhere to go. Just more water, more rising flood, more whispers. The tunnel ahead narrowed, and through the gap, he could see something flickering. Firelight. He pushed forward, the current strengthening behind him. The storm above was feeding the catacombs now, rain becoming a tide of the dead. Bones floated past. A jawbone struck his shoulder. He slipped into the narrow chute. The space tightened around him, compressing his ribs. He was crawling now, dragging himself over slick stone, the air thick with brine and mold. The whispers gave way to a thrum. Then he emerged into a cavern, a vast, circular space, the ceiling hidden in darkness. A whirlpool churned at the center, its surface eerily calm despite the chaos that fed it. Around the edges, statues lined the walls, figures in prayer, hooded, faceless, carved from salt. Julian stood, chest heaving. Water lapped at his ankles. He approached one of the statues. It looked like him. The detail was exact. The jaw, the scar on his eyebrow, the slight lean in the shoulders. Even the eyes, though blank, felt too familiar. There were others. Dozens. All of Julian. All posed differently. One covering its ears. Another screaming. A third holding a candle aloft. He backed away. The whirlpool stirred. From its depths, a voice gurgled up. You remember now. No Julian whispered. I don't want to. You wrote it. You lit the path. The whirlpool surged, and something rose from within it. Not a creature. A mirror. Standing tall, embedded in dripping rock, framed by ribs and thorn vines. The surface rippled like mercury. He saw himself, wearing the mask, mouth open, singing. He stumbled back, but his foot struck something, a quill. The same from the archive. Its tip, still wet with crimson ink, pointed toward the mirror. One more word, the voice whispered. Only one. Julian picked up the quill. His hands are no longer wet. They were bone. The statues began to hum. He stepped toward the mirror. The surface shimmered. His reflection smiled. Julian raised the quill. He didn't know if he was writing or if the story had always been written, but he pressed it to the glass. And the word he etched, slowly, trembling, was, remember. The whirlpool collapsed inward. The light vanished, and the salt water rose. Chapter 13. The Archivist. Darkness returned like a velvet curtain, suffocating and total. No more green moss, no more candlelight, no more flickering echoes of the world above. Just black, endless and humming. Julian awoke in stillness. His eyes opened slowly, not to light, but to sensation. The feeling of cold marble beneath his back, the weight of soaked clothes, the slow, rhythmic pulse of something alive in the walls. His breath fogged in front of him, though he could not see it. He sat up. A narrow beam of soft blue light shone down from a pinhole high above, illuminating a circle of dry ground. Around him stood shelves, tall, monolithic, carved directly into the stone. But they were not shelves for books. They were filled with teeth, rows and rows of teeth. Molars, incisors, fangs, some filed, some golden, some still bloodstained. Each was labeled with a name and a date. Julian staggered to his feet. The sound of dripping water echoed faintly through the chamber. Somewhere deeper, he could hear the scratch of pen on parchment. Slow, methodical, like someone recording a eulogy written in real time. Hello, he called. His voice didn't echo. It was swallowed. Something moved between the shelves. A silhouette, hunched, long-armed, wearing a cloak that trailed behind like dried kelp. It dragged something in its left hand. A massive book, bound in gray leather, etched with teeth and symbols that made Julian's stomach tighten. The figure turned. Its face was not a face. A mask, sewn from overlapping strips of human skin, held together by brass pins. Its mouth moved, but it was stitched shut. Still it spoke. You have written your way here. Julian stepped back. What is this place? The figure tilted its head. The archive. The memory of the forgotten. Who are you? I'm the hand that writes. I'm the breath between the stories. I am the archivist. Julian glanced down. On the ground near his feet was a puddle, reflecting his own face. Only the reflection smiled when he did not. I want to leave, he said. I want out. The archivist knelt slowly, the sound of its knees cracking against stone sharp as bone. From the folds of its robe, it drew a quill. Julian recognized it. The same. Always the same. There is no out, the archivist said. Only the final page. It opened the book. Julian saw his name scrawled at the top of the current page. Below it, a single line. Chapter 13. The archivist. His hands began to tremble. He backed toward the edge of the circle of light. You are not the first, the archivist said, standing. Many have written themselves into the archive. Some seeking answers. Others chasing ghosts. A few, simply listening. The walls vibrated with the hum of 1,000 voices. Whispers, laughter, screams. Why me? Julian asked. Why now? The archivist closed the book. Because you looked. It stepped forward, offering the quill. One last entry. One last truth. Julian looked down at his own hands. The skin was cracked, flaking. Beneath it, bone. He had always been here. He had always known. He took the quill. As he brought it to the page, his mouth moved of its own accord. Words spilled out. There is a city beneath the city, a song beneath the silence, a path beneath the feet of the curious. The archive remembers. And now so do I. He stopped. The ink spread across the parchment, glowing faintly. The archivist reached forward and placed a single tooth beside his name. His. The blue light above flickered. The shelves whispered, and the book closed. Julian felt himself fading, not dying, but dissolving into memory. His body remained, perhaps, But his thoughts, his fear, his voice, they all joined the archive. A new figure stirred in the shadows. Another lost soul, stepping through the salt water. The archivist turned to greet them. And deep in the archive, Julian's whisper joined the chorus. Remember, epilogue, the door above. Beneath Paris, nothing is ever still. Above, the city moved on. Tourists took photos beside skull-lined corridors, their flashes bouncing off centuries of silence. The catacombs had rules. No wandering off, no touching the bones, no straying from the guide. Simple rules, easy to break. 2 weeks after Julian disappeared, a janitor found an unmarked door at the edge of the restricted tunnels. It hadn't been there before. There was no handle, only a knocker shaped like a toothless jaw. The door was warm. He knocked. It opened. Just an inch. Just enough to hear the humming. Just enough for the whisper to say, "You've been expected." The man hasn't been seen since. Sometimes, late at night, a security guard swears he hears footsteps echoing in sealed corridors. One tourist captured audio on a GoPro, faint laughter, a wet scraping sound, and a voice that whispered not in French, but in your language, whatever it may be. Chapter 1. Because stories are patient. And the archive? It's never full.